Lee Cronin's The Mummy is the 2026 American horror film written and directed by Lee Cronin and stars Jack Reynor, Laia Costa, Calamawy, and Natalie Grace. The plot follows a young girl returning to her family after being in the Egyptian desert for 8 years and found alive inside an ancient tomb. This was actually one of my more anticipated horror movies for 2026. I don't know about you guys. I do love the Universal monsters. I've been watching the Brendan Fraser mummy stuff lately in the theater, and I also find Lee Cronin to be a pretty interesting director. I've actually been on board since his feature length debut for A24 back in, I think it was 2019 or something. The Hole in the Ground, pretty solid little creepy kid movie. I didn't love his Evil Dead movie, Evil Dead Rise, but it is solid, and it's a franchise that that I hold pretty closely. Either way, I had been super curious as to what he would be doing with his Mummy story. I liked the trailer. It definitely showed that this would be anything but a traditional Mummy story, and I was okay with that. In 1999, Stephen Sommers took the Mummy story, in the more action-adventure direction that he wanted. So Cronin takes this in his own direction too, and as the trailer clearly shows, into possession-type territory. And even if I have some mixed feelings about that, I enjoyed this enough to overlook some small things like that. So you've got the Cannon family, an American family living in Cairo for work since Charlie, the dad, is a TV reporter. One thing that I have noticed with all three of Lee Cronin's films so far is that all of the stories are written around the family. So the Cannons are a pretty tight-knit family that have had to endure 8 years without any closure after their oldest child, Katie, was abducted. Until one day, without any notice at all, they get a random phone call from the Egyptian authorities letting them know that Katie has been found and she is alive. She's in the process of waking up from a catatonic state and was mummified in bandages. And honestly, this is where the mummy elements mostly end, and it becomes a kind of just a possession movie. Although I'd say it's a bit fresher in that aspect. I mean, look, I'm over possession movies, just like you are. Oh, and in my opinion, only a literal small handful got it right. So I normally wouldn't want anything to do with that. But this really isn't your typical Exorcist clone at all. Like, there are no priests, no exorcisms. There is some predictable stuff, of course. There is actually a decent amount of that. But this is basically, Lee Cronin's, kind of still stuck in the Evil Dead universe. And even though I don't think anyone wanted that, I think it kind of works. So I'm not sure if it is just the Evil Dead fan in me, or if it's just the fact that there's some really gnarly gore here. I actually think this might be even gorier than Evil Dead Rise, oddly enough. I think I liked this quite a bit more than Evil Dead Rise, too. I thought the story was engaging, even though at its core it's a very generic possession story with some of the cliches that come with those kinds of movies that become a little bit more bearable if you look at it through an Evil Dead lens. I don't know if I'm onto something here, and I'm not trying to cope or anything. I am just trying to, I guess, kind of give my honest reasons for liking this movie, even though I do find it pretty flawed. Back to the story, though, I really was interested in watching, Charlie Cannon, kind of piecing together the story of what happened to Katie. I really wanted to know. I do think that what he finds could be slightly more unique, but it's fine. It's fine. It works well enough. They do the whole VHS tape thing that is getting pretty stale at this point. Where Charlie finds a videotape with some creepy footage, maybe even a little bit too reminiscent of Bring Her Back. Is it just me? Man, those Filippo brothers, 2 films in, and I've seen like numerous movies potentially influenced by both. It's honestly pretty cool. The characters here are mostly just okay, with the mother-in-law character bringing in a really generic, the whole Latino Catholic thing. Although what they end up doing with her was really fun, so I guess it's fine. And they also do some really fun things with Maud, the youngest of the Cannon family. I thought she was a standout. The acting is just kind of okay. It's not particularly great. It's not bad. And on that note, this movie also does go to some like fairly uncomfortable places at times. Between that and the extreme gore, um, this has just been kind of off-putting for a lot of people, and I kind of get it. All of the previous Mummy films have been pretty safe. I think a lot of people were mostly expecting that, but or at least something still, fairly safe. So I think this has kind of been shocking to a lot of people. But to like the cinephiles are complaining about it because for legitimate reasons, acting is a little stale or a little bit of wooden. Some of the criticisms I've seen, predictable, generic plot. I don't know. I do understand all those things. This one just kind of stands out in a lot of ways. Mostly in that it is only just barely, like I said, and a lot of people are saying it's only barely a Mummy movie. It's not the Mummy movie a lot of people expected, and I don't think it's the movie a lot of people wanted. This is a Mummy movie strictly for the horror fans, and like I said, even then, not everyone's digging it. So I think a lot of us are liking it, but I think even more will, maybe over time. I don't want to use the cult classic thing, but I think more people, especially horror fans, especially of more gorier films and stuff like that, I think will like this more over time. It's just a prediction. So I'm giving Lee Cronin's The Mummy 2.5 out of 4 stars. I think it's actually my favorite film from Lee Cronin so far. Again, I get people's issue with it, and I had a few of my own. But I liked the story, and I liked the gore and the violence and stuff. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex. Subscribe right now, please.